In the heart of the African savanna, nestled between rolling hills and meandering rivers, lay the village of Peaceful Springs. It was a place untouched by the chaos of the outside world. The landscape shimmered with golden grasses swaying gently in the wind, while acacia trees dotted the horizon like sentinels standing guard over a timeless world. The village was renowned for its harmony. Families lived in clay homes with thatched roofs, and neighbors treated each other as kin. The air was filled with the laughter of children, the rhythmic beats of drums during festivals, and the lilting hum of women singing as they pounded grain into flour. The people of Peaceful Springs were deeply spiritual. At the heart of the village stood the Church of Eternal Light, a modest structure built with clay walls and a straw-thatched roof. The church was more than just a place of worship, it was the soul of the village, where people gathered to celebrate births, mourn losses, and seek solace in times of uncertainty. Reverend Mwamba, the church's shepherd, was a kind-hearted elder with a graying beard and a voice as soothing as a lullaby. His wisdom and humility had earned him the love and respect of the villagers. But as with all places of peace, a storm was brewing. A change was on the horizon, one that would test the faith of the villagers and reveal truths they never imagined. The village's tranquility was disrupted one evening by the arrival of a stranger. His name was Brother Ezekiel, a wandering preacher with eyes that seemed to pierce through to one's soul. He arrived at dusk, his silhouette framed against the setting sun, carrying nothing but a worn leather Bible and a staff. His presence was immediately noted, whispers spread through the village like wildfire. Some were curious, others wary, but all were intrigued by this new figure who spoke of a different kind of light. Brother Ezekiel didn't immediately approach the Church of Eternal Light. Instead, he settled at the edge of the village, under an old baobab tree, and began to hold nightly gatherings. His sermons were intense, full of fervor, speaking of miracles, divine visions, and a personal connection to God that seemed to contrast with the gentle teachings of Reverend Mwamba. The villagers, drawn by his charisma and the promise of spiritual awakening, began to attend these gatherings. His tales of divine intervention and messages from the heavens were captivating, yet unsettling. He spoke of a coming change, a new era where faith would not just be practiced but would be lived in every moment, every breath. Reverend Mwamba, sensing the shift in the village's spiritual atmosphere, decided to meet this newcomer. Their encounter was marked by a respectful but palpable tension. Reverend Mwamba, with his years of guiding the village through simple faith and communal love, found Brother Ezekiel's approach to be foreign and perhaps even dangerous. Ezekiel, on his part, saw Mwamba's methods as outdated, lacking the urgency he believed the modern world required. As the nights passed, the village found itself at a crossroads. Families were divided, some were drawn to the passionate, almost mystical teachings of Ezekiel, while others clung to the comforting familiarity of the Church of Eternal Light. The once unified village now buzzed with debate and doubt. The story of Peaceful Springs was no longer just about serene living but had evolved into a narrative of spiritual conflict, testing the very essence of what it meant to have faith. What would become of this village, and what truths would be unveiled in this clash of beliefs? Only time, and perhaps a deeper understanding of faith itself, would tell. One fateful morning, the tranquility of Peaceful Springs was shattered by the arrival of a stranger. Apostle Jonah strode into the village with a purpose that seemed to ripple through the air, his every step deliberate and resonant. He was tall and commanding, his spotless white robe gleaming under the African sun, casting a halo around him. His staff, adorned with intricate carvings that appeared to shimmer with an ethereal light, was like an extension of his divine mission. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice a rich, captivating melody, both gentle yet firm, that seemed to echo across the savannah, drawing all eyes to him. "I am Jonah, a servant of the Lord. I have been sent to bring a new light to this village, a light that will guide you to prosperity and divine favor." The villagers, unaccustomed to such grandeur and promise, were utterly mesmerized. Jonah's charisma was not just in his words but in his presence. He carried himself with an authority that made the ordinary seem miraculous. He spoke of miracles and blessings with such conviction that even the skeptics among the crowd felt a stir in their hearts. He promised the impossible: barren women bearing children, the sick regaining their health, and the poor finding wealth. "The Church of Eternal Light has served you well," Jonah acknowledged, his voice carrying a subtle challenge, like a gentle wind that could soon turn into a storm. "But the time has come for a new path. Join my ministry, and you shall witness the power of the Almighty like never before." Curiosity and a thirst for something more potent than what they had known began to seep into the hearts of the villagers. They gathered around him, listening intently as he painted visions of a transformed peaceful springs, where divine intervention was not just a hope but a daily occurrence. His sermons were held under the vast sky, his words mingling with the breeze, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and awe. As Jonah's ministry grew, so did the attendance at his gatherings. His words were not just spoken, they were performed. He would lay hands on the sick, and whether through faith or the sheer power of belief, some claimed improvements in their health. He spoke of visions, of divine messages that would lead the village to a new era of prosperity. Reverend Mwamba, observing from the sidelines, felt a quiet unease settle in his heart. He had shepherded this flock with love, teaching humility, community, and the quiet strength of faith. Jonah's approach was like a fire, bright, consuming, and potentially destructive. Mwamba knew the power of faith but also understood its dangers when wielded with the wrong intentions. The village was now at a spiritual crossroads. The old ways, with their comforting rituals and communal harmony, stood in contrast to Jonah's promise of miraculous change. Families whispered in their homes, debating, some drawn to the allure of immediate divine intervention, others wary of abandoning the teachings that had held them together for generations. Peaceful Springs was no longer just a village of serene living, it had become a battleground for souls, where the old and the new faith would clash, revealing truths about belief, power, and the human heart. The coming days would test not just the faith of the villagers but the very essence of what it meant to follow a spiritual path. Miracles and wonders. Within mere weeks, Jonah's ministry, the sanctuary of divine power, became the central buzz of Peaceful Springs. His gatherings, held in a large open field near the edge of the forest, drew crowds like moths to a flame, swelling with each sermon. The air was thick with anticipation as Jonah narrated tales of miracles that seemed to defy the natural order. He claimed to heal the blind, cure the lame, and expel evil spirits with a command as if he were a conduit of divine power. Testimonies spread like wildfire through the village. Mama Amina, a widow who had lived with the sorrow of her son's blindness, now spoke with tears of joy in her eyes, claiming Jonah had restored her son's vision. Kofi, previously known for his unproductive fields, now boasted of how Jonah's prayers had turned his barren land into a fertile oasis, yielding crops that were the envy of the village. The villagers were in awe, their faith invigorated by these tangible signs of divine intervention. However, beneath the surface of these wonders, a dark undercurrent of unease began to weave through the community. Strange occurrences marred the peace of Peaceful Springs. Livestock, essential to the village's livelihood, started vanishing without a trace. Families were disturbed by nocturnal whispers, voices that seemed to come from nowhere, chilling the night air. Shadows danced oddly under the moonlight, moving in ways that defied explanation. Jonah, unfazed, interpreted these oddities as the desperate tactics of dark forces, opposing his holy mission. "The devil is at work," he would proclaim, his voice booming over the crowd, seeking to sow doubt and fear among us. "But fear not, for God's light will prevail." Reverend Mwamba, observing from afar, felt a heavy burden in his heart. The village he had nurtured through years of gentle guidance was now divided. His church, once the spiritual and communal heart of Peaceful Springs, seemed to lose its luster in the shadow of Jonah's miracles. Yet, Mwamba held his peace, his faith in the truth guiding him to silence. He believed that time, the great revealer, would unveil the authenticity of these miraculous claims. As Jonah's influence grew, so did the tension. Some villagers began to question the source of Jonah's power. Was it truly divine, or was there another force at play? The once cohesive community was now split between those who saw Jonah as a savior sent by God and those who feared what these new miracles might truly signify. The sanctuary of divine power was not just a new church, it had become a symbol of change, of challenge to the old ways, and of a spiritual battle that was yet to fully unfold. Peaceful Springs stood at a precipice, where the miraculous could either be a beacon of hope or a harbinger of a darker truth. Only time would tell which path the village would ultimately walk. Not everyone in Peaceful Springs was swept away by Jonah's charisma. Nia, a young herbalist with a reputation for her sharp intellect and independent spirit, stood among the skeptics. She had been raised by her grandmother, learning the wisdom of the land, the healing properties of herbs, and the importance of trusting one's intuition over flamboyant proclamations. Her brother, Kamau, known for his prowess as a hunter and his role in safeguarding the village, echoed her skepticism. One evening, as the siblings sat by the comforting warmth of the fire, Nia shared a troubling vision with Kamau. "I saw Jonah," she began, her voice quivering with the weight of her dream. But he wasn't alone. There was a dark figure standing behind him, whispering in his ear. Jonah's face changed, Kamau. It became monstrous. Kamau's jaw clenched in response, the firelight casting shadows over his concerned face. "If your dreams are true, we must act. But first, we need proof." Together, they plotted to unveil Jonah's secrets. Kamau and Nia started surveilling Jonah's activities with meticulous care. They observed that after each of his charismatic sermons, he would slip away into the forest, disappearing into the night. Determined to see what lay beyond his public facade, one moonlit night, they decided to trail him. They moved silently through the underbrush, their steps barely disturbing the night's quiet. Their pursuit led them to a secluded clearing where an unnatural light seemed to pulse from the earth. Hiding behind a dense thicket, they watched, their eyes wide with shock at the scene unfolding before them. Jonah was there, kneeling in reverence before a grotesque statue of a horned creature, its features twisted in malevolence. The ground around was marked with symbols, drawn in what appeared to be blood, forming an ominous circle around the idol. Jonah's voice, now chanting in a tongue foreign and chilling, resonated with a malice that was palpable in the night air. "He's not a servant of God," Nia whispered, her voice low and trembling with fear. "He's something else entirely." The siblings, hearts racing, made a hasty retreat back to the village. The truth they had witnessed was far more sinister than they could have imagined. They knew they had to alert the others, but the challenge was formidable. How could they convince the enamored villagers of Jonah's true nature without concrete proof? Their minds raced with strategies. They needed evidence that would shake the villagers' faith in Jonah, something undeniable. Nia thought of the herbs she knew could reveal hidden marks or the truth behind illusions, while Kamau considered the possibility of capturing or recording Jonah's nocturnal activities. The night was still young, and their resolve was firm. They would expose Jonah, but they would need to be clever, swift, and above all, cautious. The safety of Peaceful Springs might depend on their next moves, and the darkness they had glimpsed was not just a threat to their village but to the very soul of its people. The next day, Nia and Kamau, with hearts heavy from the burden of their secret, approached Reverend Mwamba. They recounted their nocturnal discovery under the cloak of morning light, their words painting a dark picture of the man who had claimed divinity. The old pastor, his face etched with concern, listened with a gravity that spoke volumes of his wisdom and his worry. "The truth must come to light," Reverend Mwamba murmured, his voice steady but his eyes reflecting the storm within. "But we must tread carefully. Jonah's hold on the people is strong." The tension in Peaceful Springs was palpable as the day of Jonah's next sermon arrived. The villagers gathered, their faces a mix of devotion and curiosity, unaware of the revelation that was about to unfold. As Jonah began his sermon with his usual fervor, Reverend Mwamba, with a dignity that commanded respect, stood and faced the crowd. "A true servant of God has no secrets," he proclaimed, his voice carrying a solemn challenge. "Apostle Jonah, will you show us your prayers and rituals? Jonah, usually so composed, showed a flicker of uncertainty. His confident smile slipped for a moment, replaced by a nervous laugh. The ways of the divine are sacred and not for everyone to see, he countered, trying to regain his footing with an air of sanctity. Nia, undeterred by Jonah's attempt to deflect, stepped forward. In her hands was a small clay pot, its contents a blend of herbs and ash, known to her through generations of healing lore to reveal deceit and dark magic. If you are truly of God, she challenged, her voice clear and unwavering, this will not harm you. Before Jonah could react, she flung the mixture towards him. The effect was as dramatic as it was terrifying. Jonah recoiled, letting out a blood-curdling scream as smoke rose from his skin, his robe catching fire and burning away. What was revealed beneath was not the guise of a holy man but something far more sinister, patches of scaly, reptilian skin, glinting malevolently in the harsh daylight. The crowd, once enraptured by his words, now recoiled in horror, their gasps a chorus of shock and betrayal. Jonah's true nature was laid bare for all to see. The illusion of his divinity shattered, leaving behind the undeniable evidence of his sinister affiliations. The villagers, confronted with this grotesque reality, began to murmur, fear and anger mingling in the air. Reverend Mwamba, stepping forward once more, raised his hands for silence. We have seen the truth, he said solemnly. Let us not be led astray by false prophets. Let us return to the light of truth and love, to the church of eternal light, where we find our real strength. In the aftermath, Jonah, his power broken, attempted to flee but was quickly apprehended by Kamau and others who had seen enough to act. The village was left to grapple with the deception, to heal from the division it had caused, and to rebuild their faith with a new, cautious wisdom. Peaceful Springs would never be the same, but from this ordeal, it would emerge with a deeper understanding of faith, community, and the darkness that can lurk behind the mask of light. Jonah fled into the forest, panic lending speed to his once charismatic steps. His heart pounded with the terror of exposure and the desperation to escape. Behind him, Kamau, driven by duty and a fierce protective instinct for his village, led a determined group of villagers in pursuit. Their resolve was firm, fueled by a mix of anger, betrayal, and the need to safeguard their home from this newfound darkness. They tracked him to the very clearing where Nia and Kamau had witnessed his dark ritual. The once eerie glow of the place now seemed tainted, the air thick with an ominous foreboding. The grotesque statue stood as a silent testament to the malevolence they had come to confront. With his back against the ancient, blood-marked stone, Jonah realized he was cornered. His eyes darted around, seeking an escape that wasn't there. In a desperate bid for survival, he began to transform. His body contorted, elongating in unnatural ways, his skin shedding its human facade to reveal a horrific creature beneath. His eyes, now glowing like the embers of a dying fire, bore into the villagers with a mix of hatred and fear. Kamau, standing at the forefront with a torch in hand, did not waver. He knew what had to be done. For Peaceful Springs, he shouted, his voice rallying the villagers. They moved as one, armed not just with physical weapons but with the collective strength of their faith and courage. They attacked the statue with whatever they had, machetes, stones, and the fire from their torches. The statue, the source of Jonah's dark power, began to crumble under their assault. As the last piece fell, a shockwave of energy erupted, severing the connection that empowered Jonah. The monstrous creature, now bereft of its magical anchor, let out an unearthly wail, a sound that pierced the night, a lament of defeat. Its form flickered, struggling against the sudden disempowerment, before it dissolved into the shadows, vanishing as if it were never there. The events of Jonah's arrival left an indelible mark on Peaceful Springs, etching a chapter of caution and wisdom into the village's history. The ordeal had tested the spirit of the community, exposing vulnerabilities but also highlighting the strength found in unity and truth. In the aftermath, Reverend Mwamba took on the role of a healer not just of the soul but of the community's shaken trust. He held gatherings where he spoke not only of faith but of discernment, encouraging the villagers to question, to seek understanding, and to